want you to close your eyes for a second, unless you're driving. Please don't close your eyes if you're driving. But just mentally transport yourself into your kitchen.
Okay.
It's Saturday morning. Maybe you're 10 years old or maybe you're 40. The skillet is sizzling. The smell of butter and, batter is wafting through the house.
I'm there. I can smell it.
You open the pantry or look at the breakfast table, and what do you see?
For about 130 years, the answer for millions of Americans was the same thing. You saw the red box, you saw the bottle of syrup, and you saw the face.
That face. It's probably one of the most recognizable images in the history of global advertising. The warm smile, the pearl earrings in later years, that sense of comfort, it was a staple.
Absolutely.
But if you walk down that same grocery aisle today, in the post-2021 world, that face is gone. The name is gone. The box is still red. The font looks kind of similar, but it says Pearl Milling Company.
Which, let's be honest, sounds a bit like a generic shell company from a movie about corporate embezzlement. It's very industrial.
It is. It sounds like a place where you'd buy sheet metal, not pancake mix.
What?
And for a lot of consumers, that switch felt like a glitch in the Matrix. It felt like it happened overnight.
Right.
One day she's there, the next day, headlines are blazing, social media is melting down, and the brand is... well, it's effectively erased.
But that's the thing. And this is what we're really digging into today. It wasn't sudden. I mean, the erasure was sudden, sure.
But the final act was sudden?
Exactly. But the tension that led to it, that had been boiling for over a century. The writing had been on the wall since before the brand was even a national hit.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We have a massive stack of sources here. We've got legal briefs from 1915, old census records from the 1930s, minstrel show playbills from the 1880s, and corporate press releases from 2020. We are going to look past the culture war headlines.
We have to.
Because this isn't just a story about a logo change.
No, it's much darker, much more complex, and frankly, much more interesting than a simple PR move. This is a story about the invention of modern advertising. It's about a trademark lawsuit that actually changed the fundamental laws of American capitalism.
And most importantly, it's about the actual breathing women who played this character.
Yes, that's the human core of it.
That's the part that really hooked me. We are talking about women who were pioneers in a way, but who were also trapped in a caricature that mocked their very existence.
It's a paradox. You have a brand built on a mammy archetype, literally designed to soothe white anxiety after the Civil War,
Right.
that also provided the first real path to fame and, well, some financial independence for black female models in America.
Right.
Grappling with that duality is what makes this story so difficult and so necessary.
So let's get into the weeds, and I was genuinely surprised to find that this story doesn't start on a plantation in the Deep South. It doesn't start with a family recipe handed down through generations of cooks.
No, not at all. It starts in St. Joseph, Missouri. The year is 1888. And it starts with a problem that I think any modern entrepreneur would recognize immediately: market saturation.
Okay, so St. Joseph, Missouri. We're talking about two guys here, Chris L. Rutt and Charles G. Underwood.
Right. Rutt was a newspaper editor, a guy used to spinning stories, which becomes very relevant later, and Underwood was his partner.
A words guy.
A words guy. And they decide to pivot careers and buy a flour mill. On paper, it seemed like a safe bet. Everyone needs flour, right? It's a staple.
But they timed it poorly.
Horribly. It was the tail end of the Industrial Revolution's impact on agriculture. Technology had made milling so efficient that the market was absolutely glutted.
So just too much supply.
Way too much. There's too much flour and not enough buyers. Prices had crashed. So Rutt and Underwood are sitting on this pile of product they can't move. They were bleeding money. They needed a differentiator.
This is the classic necessity is the mother of invention moment. They couldn't just sell flour, so they had to sell something else.
Precisely. They spent about a year experimenting in that mill. And you have to remember, they weren't chefs. They were desperate businessmen trying to save a failing investment.
Right.
They took their excess wheat flour, mixed it with cornmeal, and then added two crucial chemical ingredients: phosphate of lime and soda.
Baking soda.
Essentially, yes. They were creating a chemical reaction in a bag. They created the world's first self-rising pancake flour. You have to understand, before this, pancakes were a scratch process.
Right, let's contextualize that for you if you're listening and just dump the mix in the bowl today. Before this, you had to manage your own leavening. That was the hard part.
Exactly. You had to have a sourdough starter, or you had to measure out your baking soda and cream of tartar perfectly.
Hmm.
If you got the ratio wrong, you had hardtack or sludge. It was a skill.
A real chemical process in your own kitchen.
It was. Rutt and Underwood automated the chemistry. They put the science in the bag.
That's a massive technological leap. It's really the birth of convenience food as we know it.
It is. It's the grandfather of the TV dinner and the instant noodle. But they had a branding problem.
Yeah.
They were selling this miracle powder in generic paper sacks. It had no identity. It was just white powder.
Which is a hard sell.
Yeah.
Here, buy this bag of mystery powder. It makes breakfast. Not a great slogan.
Exactly. They have the what, but they don't have the who. They need a hook. They need a story.
And this is where the story takes a turn into the entertainment culture of the late 19th century.
Yeah.
And we have to be really clear about what entertainment meant in 1889.
We do. In late 1889, Chris Rudd, the newspaper editor, goes to a vaudeville house in St. Joseph to clear his head. He's looking for inspiration. And when we say vaudeville or minstrelsy, I mean, we are talking about the dominant form of American entertainment at the time.
And it was almost entirely rooted in mocking Black people.
That was its foundation. So Rutt watches a performance, and he sees a musical number featuring a song called Old Aunt Jemima.
Oh, wait.
Right. The song itself had been written back in 1875 by a Black performer named Billy Kersands. So it has this complex origin itself as a standard on the circuit. It was a massive hit.
So people knew the song. It had name recognition.
It did. But here's the detail that really underscores how artificial this brand identity was. There are conflicting accounts of what exactly Rutt saw on stage that night.
Because history is never a straight line.
Exactly. One account says he saw a pair of blackface performers named Baker and Farrell, but another very credible account suggests he saw a performer named Pete F. Baker.
And Pete F. Baker was a white man.
A white man. And he wasn't just playing a black character. This is where it gets truly bizarre.
Okay, brace myself.
The act was a white man wearing blackface, playing a character who was a German immigrant, who in turn was imitating a black minstrel, parodying a black female cook.
Wait. I need you to parse that for me. My brain just did a somersault.
I know. Let's walk through it.
It's a white guy
Pretending to be a German guy.
who is pretending to be a Black woman.
But not even a black woman. He's pretending to be a black minstrel performer who is parodying a black woman.
So it's a copy of a caricature.
Correct. It is layers of artifice. Rutt wasn't looking at a real person or a genuine cultural tradition. He was looking at a funhouse mirror reflection designed to make white audiences laugh at black stereotypes.
It's like Inception, but for racism.
That is actually a very accurate way to put it. But Rutt didn't see the artifice, or he didn't care. He saw the reaction. The crowd loved it. The character was wearing an apron and a kerchief, singing this catchy, rhythmic song, and Rutt had his aha moment.
That's the brand.
That's the brand. He appropriated the name Aunt Jemima and the image from the lithograph posters right there in the theater lobby.
Let's pause on the name, Aunt Jemima. To a modern ear, before 2020, that just sounded like a brand name, like Betty Crocker or Uncle Ben. But in 1889, Aunt carried a very specific, very heavy weight.
It was the coded language of the Jim Crow South. You have to remember, white Southerners absolutely refused to use honorifics like Mrs. or Mr. for black people.
They wouldn't grant them that dignity.
Never. That implied equality. So aunt uncle became the default terms for older enslaved or formerly enslaved people. It was a way to enforce a social hierarchy.
It's insidious because it sounds affectionate, aunt. It implies family. It implies love.
That's the trap. It was a way of claiming familiarity. You're part of our family, while strictly maintaining hierarchy. But you are not my equal. It signaled that this person was safe, domestic, and subservient.
So by choosing that name, Rutt was explicitly tapping into the mammy archetype.
Precisely. We need to define that. The mammy is a very specific sociological construct. It depicts a black woman who is completely devoted to the white family she serves, often more than to her own family.
Right.
She is desexualized, usually depicted as overweight, dark-skinned, smiling, and infinitely patient. It was the white fantasy of the happy slave.
It's the idea that, hey, slavery wasn't that bad. Look how happy she is to cook for us.
Huh.
It's a justification after the fact.
Exactly. Yeah. And Rutt and Underwood, two guys in Missouri facing a flour surplus, looked at that archetype and decided it was the perfect vehicle to sell breakfast.
And from a cold, cynical marketing perspective, they were right.
They were. You have to look at the timeline. We're talking late 1880s, early 1890s. The Civil War has been over for 25 years, but the country is still obsessed with it. The South is establishing Jim Crow laws. There was a deep, deep nostalgia among white Americans, North and South, for the good old days of the plantation.
For a version of the good old days that never really
A
existed.
fantasy version. So this pancake mix wasn't just selling food, it was selling a comforting lie about history. It was saying, remember when things were simple. Remember when everyone knew their place.
It validated that nostalgic worldview. It told consumers, here is this happy, smiling figure who wants nothing more than to cook for you. It offered a taste of plantation hospitality without the moral burden of slavery.
Perfect summary.
Uh,
But here's the irony.
Okay.
Despite this genius branding, Rutt and Underwood actually failed, didn't they? They ran out of capital.
All that, and they still went broke.
They did. They were idea guys, not operators. They ran out of money in 1890 and sold the company to the R.T. Davis Milling Company. And this is where the marketing machine really turns on.
Okay.
The Davis Company had the capital to take this local Missouri brand and turn it into a national myth.
This is the part of the research that really blew my mind. The amount of backstory they invented for this character is like something out of a Tolkien novel. They didn't just put a picture on a box, they wrote a whole fictional biography.
It was total world building. Marketers invented a plantation owner named Colonel Higby.
Colonel Higgy, of course it's a colonel.
Of course. The story went that Aunt Jemima was the loyal cook on Colonel Higby's plantation in Louisiana.
Louisiana. But the mill was in Missouri.
Geography didn't matter. They needed the Deep South cred. Louisiana sounded more authentic to the plantation narrative than Missouri. They claimed the secret recipe was from the South before the Civil War. They coined the phrase, matchless plantation flavor.
It's just layer upon layer of fiction.
And they had these wild stories about her heroism during the war.
Oh, this is the best part.
They went all out. One pamphlet claimed Aunt Jemima fed Union soldiers strictly to delay them so that Colonel Higby could escape capture.
So she's a Confederate loyalist.
In their telling, yes. It framed her loyalty specifically to her enslaver. It's a choice.
A very specific choice. What was the other one? Something about a shipwreck.
Yes. Another story said she revived a group of shipwreck survivors with her flapjacks.
Wait, she revived shipwreck survivors with pancakes? Like CPR, but with syrup.
That was the claim. They turned her into a superhero of domesticity. But again, let's do a reality check. The recipe came from a chemical experiment by two white guys in St. Joseph, Missouri in 1888.
Using a pearl milling process, hence the eventual name change.
Exactly. The Davis Milling Company wasn't even in a northern state, really. Missouri was a border state. The whole Deep South lineage was complete fiction.
It's amazing how effective it was. And they pushed this fiction directly to children, too, the paper dolls.
The paper dolls are a fascinating and honestly disturbing piece of cultural history. Starting in 1894, you could cut out a family of dolls from the pancake box.
Okay.
You had Aunt Jemima, and they gave her a husband named Uncle Rastus, later Uncle Mose. Rastus itself being a name for minstrelsy.
Of course. And the children? The names are caricatures.
Comically and offensively named. You had children named Abraham Lincoln, Dilsey, Zeb, and Dinah, which is the collection of stereotypes. But the genius, and I use that word strictly in a manipulative marketing sense, was the before and after concept.
Right. This is the Horatio Alger twist.
So the dolls came on the box barefoot and dressed in tattered clothing. The label said, before the receipt was sold, receipt being the old word for recipe.
So poverty. They are depicting poverty. And not just poverty, but the poverty of enslavement.
Explicit poverty. But if you bought another box or sent away for a premium, you could get elegant clothing cutouts to put over the dolls. And that set was labeled after the receipt was sold.
So is a rags to riches story?
Exactly. It symbolized that because she sold the recipe to the Northern Milling Company, the family was now wealthy. It was a way of saying, see, everyone wins. The white company gets the pancakes, and the black family gets rich.
It effectively erased the slavery aspect of the Mammy character and replaced it with a capitalist success story, even though the character herself was still depicted as a servant in the advertising.
It sanitized the history. It allowed white consumers to feel benevolent. By buying this pancake mix, I'm helping Aunt Jemima get her new clothes. It assuaged any guilt. It was a masterclass in psychological marketing.
Okay, so that's the myth, that's the fiction. But unlike Betty Crocker, who was a composite drawing, Aunt Jemima was played by real women. And this is where the story gets incredibly human and tragic. We have to talk about Nancy Green.
Nancy Green is the original. If you think about the brand's explosion, it is largely due to her charisma. She was born into slavery in Montgomery County, Kentucky in 1834.
So she had lived the reality that the brand was fantasizing about.
She had. She moved to Chicago after the war and was working as a cook for a judge, a respected figure in her community. Her big break came at the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago.
We have to set the scene for the 1893 World's Fair. This wasn't just a county fair. This was the White City. This was a major global event.
It was arguably the most important cultural event of the 19th century in America. It was designed to show the world that America had arrived. Electricity, architecture, the first Ferris wheel, and the Davis Milling Company had a huge idea for a stunt.
Literally huge. They built a flour barrel that was 24 feet high.
A giant flour barrel pavilion. And standing outside was Nancy Green. She was 59 years old. She was dressed in the full costume apron, headscarf, and she just worked. She cooked pancakes by the thousands, she sang songs, and she told stories about the Old South.
Pies in town, honey. That was the slogan.
That was the catchphrase. And she was magnetic. She was a massive hit. You have to realize, she was arguably the first black corporate model in the United States. She gave the brand a heartbeat. Police had to be called in to control the crowds around her booth.
She was a superstar.
A genuine celebrity. She received a medal and a certificate from the fair organizers. She was offered a lifetime contract.
But there is a really stark contrast happening at that same fair. Because while Nancy Green is performing this happy slave role for crowds, who else is in Chicago?
Ida B. Wells, the legendary journalist and anti-lynching crusader. She was there, along with Frederick Douglass and other progressive black leaders, protesting the fair.
Why were they protesting?
They were handing out pamphlets titled, "The Reason Why the Colored American is Not in the World's Columbian Exposition." They were furious because the fair organizers had largely excluded black achievement.
So no black inventors, scientists.
Exactly. They weren't showing black inventors or poets or doctors. They were showing primitive villages from Africa. And they were showing Nancy Green making pancakes. That was the extent of black representation.
So you have Ida B. Wells saying, we are intellectuals and creators. And just a few hundred yards away, corporate America is saying, look at this happy Aunt Jemima.
It perfectly captures the struggle of that era. Progressive black women saw Aunt Jemima as a mammy for the national household. They hated it. They saw it as validating the idea that black people were natural servants. It was a battle for the soul of black representation, and Nancy Green was right in the middle of it.
But for Nancy Green, this was a good job by the standards of the time for a black woman.
A very good job. It gave her financial security. She used her platform to advocate for anti-poverty programs in Chicago. She was a key figure at her church, Olivet Baptist Church. She was not a passive victim.
But did she get rich from this? The paper dolls said the family got rich.
Nancy Green did not get rich in the way the company owners did, not even close. She had a steady job, she had fame. But here is the heartbreaking detail. She died in 1923 in a car crash on the streets of Chicago. A truck collided with a laundry wagon, and it overturned on the sidewalk where she was standing.
And her burial.
She was buried in a pauper's grave, unmarked, in Chicago's Oakwood Cemetery.
That is devastating. The face of a global brand, a Chicago celebrity, buried without a headstone.
It took until 2020, nearly 100 years later, for a headstone to finally be placed for her by a historical society. It really highlights the gap between the value she created for the company and the value the society placed on her as a person.
She even refused to go to Paris for the 1900 exhibition.
She did. She had leverage and she used it. But at the end of her life, the system still failed her.
And she wasn't the only one. There were many women who played this role over the years.
Dozens. Once the company saw how well Nancy Green worked, they hired actresses regionally to do cooking demos at grocery stores and county fairs. But the next big national figure was Lillian Richard.
And she has a very different story, geographically at least.
Yes, she was hired in 1925. She was from Texas.
Yeah.
She portrayed the character for 23 years. And this is where we start to see the local pride aspect.
Right.
Her hometown of Hawkins, Texas, is actually known as the pancake capital of Texas.
Because of her.
Specifically because of her. The local Chamber of Commerce leans into it. Her family is incredibly proud of her legacy. For them, she was a star. She was traveling, she was earning money, she was representing her community on a national stage. This is going to be very important when we get to the end of this story.
That pride, yeah. But before that, we have to talk about Anna Robinson. Because if Nancy Green established the character, Anna Robinson defined the look that most people remember from the mid-20th century.
Right. Anna Robinson was hired for the 1933 Chicago World's Fair, another World's Fair, another pivotal moment. Now, physically, she was different from the previous models. She was much heavier. She weighed about 350 pounds.
Which fit the stereotype more closely, the visual stereotype anyway.
Exactly. The company, which was Quaker Oats by this point, wanted that plump, motherly look. They felt Nancy Green was too slender. They wanted the full caricature. And they leaned hard into the celebrity angle with her.
This is the part with the nightclubs.
Yes. There are photos of Anna Robinson making pancakes at El Morocco and the Stork Club in New York.
Wait, El Morocco? Like the high society nightclub where Bogart and Bacall would hang out?
The very same. Imagine the scene as the 1930s or 40s. You have the absolute elite of New York society movie stars, Broadway legends, tycoons in tuxedos and gowns, and there is Anna Robinson in her costume serving them pancakes.
She was part of the glitterati scene, but as a prop.
Completely. She was atmosphere. And the company put out this narrative that she was living the high life, just like the people she served.
They claimed she lived in a 22-room mansion.
They did. They said she was essentially American royalty, a celebrity chef before the term existed.
But you dug into the census records. What was the truth?
The 1940 census is the source of truth here. It shows she rented an apartment in a 4-flat in Washington Park on Chicago's South Side. She lived there with her daughter and grandchildren. Her total payment in 1939 was reported as $1,200.
Okay, doing some quick inflation math. $1,200 in 1939 is about $26,000 or $27,000 in today's money.
Right. It is barely a living wage. It certainly isn't 22-room mansion money. She died poor. The disparity between the image of abundance she projected and the scarcity she lived in is staggering. It was performance in every sense of the word.
There were others too, right? Just to show the scale of this.
Oh, yes. There was Edith Wilson. She's interesting because she was already a star. She was a classic blues singer and actress. She played the character on radio and in the first TV commercials. She was the first Aunt Jemima to really step into the mass media age.
And then Aileen Lewis at Disneyland. This one feels like a fever dream.
It really does. Aunt Jemima's Pancake House in Frontierland. It opened in 1955. Aileen Lewis would serve dignitaries there. There's a story of her serving Jawaharlal Nehru, the Prime Minister of India.
That is a surreal image. The Prime Minister of India being served pancakes by a woman playing a caricature of an American slave in a theme park built by Walt Disney.
It speaks to how deeply embedded this character was in the American cultural fabric. It wasn't just a logo, it was an institution. It was considered wholesome.
The last living Aunt Jemima was a woman named Rosie Lee Moore Hall, right?
Yes. She was hired by an advertising agency to portray the character, and she worked for Quaker until her death in 1967. After that, they stopped using a live model as the main face of the brand.
So that institution wasn't just cultural, it was legal. This is one of the most surprising things I found in the research, the Aunt Jemima doctrine. I had no idea this brand actually changed the law.
Yes. If you are a lawyer or a law student, you might know this case, Aunt Jemima Mills Company v. Rigney & Co. from 1917. It fundamentally changed trademark law in the United States.
Set the scene for us. What was the law before 1915?
Before this ruling, trademark protection was very narrow. It was based on the idea of passing off. You only infringed on a trademark if you sold the exact same product and tried to trick people.
So if I sold Host Speaker's flour, you couldn't sell Host Speaker's flour.
Right, but you could sell Host Speaker's syrup because flour and syrup are different products. The law didn't see a connection.
Yeah, that seems simplistic, but I guess in a smaller economy, it made sense.
Right, so the Aunt Jemima Company sued a rival, Rigney & Co., who was selling pancake syrup under the name Aunt Jemima with a similar logo.
And the lower court threw the case out.
They did. They followed the old rule. They said flour is flour, syrup is syrup. No confusion. Case closed.
But Aunt Jemima appealed.
They did. And the Second Circuit Court reversed the ruling. They created a new legal theory. They said that because flour and syrup are commonly used together, they're related goods, consumers would assume they came from the same source.
So using the name on a related product could damage the reputation of the original.
Precisely. Therefore, the brand protection extends to the syrup, too. This became known as the Aunt Jemima doctrine.
So it set the precedent for modern trademark protection across related goods?
It did. It acknowledged that a brand is more than just the specific product. It's the reputation. It's the goodwill. It's why Coca-Cola can stop you from making Coca-Cola sneakers, even though they don't sell sneakers. That all goes back to a case about pancake mix.
So the happy slave narrative didn't just sell pancakes, it helped write the rules of American capitalism regarding intellectual property.
It connects the dots in a way few other brands do, from minstrelsy to marketing to modern law.
Now let's fast forward a bit. The image didn't stay frozen in 1890. As America changed, the brand tried to adapt.
Slowly. Painfully slowly. For decades, it was a heavy caricature. Very dark skin, exaggerated features, straight out of the minstrel poster. But over time, they tried to soften it. In 1968, they slimmed her down.
The svelte look. This is during the Civil Rights era, so that's not a coincidence.
Absolutely not. They gave her a white collar and a geometric headband. It still looked like a kerchief, but it was stylized. They were trying to make her look less like a plantation cook and more like a modern domestic servant. A subtle but important shift.
And then the big change in 1989, the 100th anniversary.
That was the Pearl era. They removed the head covering completely. That was huge. The kerchief was the primary signifier of the mammy or the enslaved woman.
It was the most criticized part of the image.
By far. They took it off, gave her wavy gray-streaked hair, pearl earrings, and a lace collar.
Quaker called it a more sophisticated look.
Contemporary was the word they used. They were trying to pivot from servant to grandmotherly figure, but the name remained, and the history remained. You can put pearls on the image, but it's still named after a minstrel song about a slave.
And that tension didn't go unnoticed. Artists and activists had been pointing this out for decades.
Absolutely. We have to talk about Betty Sar. She is a legendary artist. In 1972, she created a piece called The Liberation of Aunt Jemima.
Describe that for us. It's a very confronting image.
It is a mixed media assemblage. She took one of those stereotypical Aunt Jemima notepad holders, the kind you'd hang at a kitchen, and she placed it inside a box lined with the brand's imagery.
Okay.
But she armed her. She put a rifle in one hand and a hand grenade in the other. In front of her is a large, clenched, black power fist.
Wow. Talk about subverting the submissive narrative.
It was a powerful statement. It transformed the mammy from a passive servant into a revolutionary. It forced people to look at the violence inherent in the stereotype. It asked, what if she fought back? It's an iconic piece of black feminist art.
And then you have pop culture in the 90s, Public Enemy.
Burn, Hollywood, burn. Big Daddy Kane has that verse. As for playing a lawyer, out of the question. For what they play, Aunt Jemima is the perfect term. He was criticizing how black actors were boxed into these subservient roles.
The name itself had become shorthand for a specific kind of stereotype.
It had. And it also became a slur. I think that's important to acknowledge. It wasn't just a harmless brand name.
No, it became a weapon. It became the female equivalent of calling someone an Uncle Tom. It meant you were a sellout or subservient to white interests. We saw this used against high-profile political figures.
Right. It was used against Condoleezza Rice when she was Secretary of State.
Our radio host called her that.
He did. And more recently, Kamala Harris. When she was selected as VP, a mayor in Virginia posted a meme referring to her as Aunt Jemima.
Which led to immediate censures and apologies.
Because everyone understood what it meant. It wasn't a compliment about her cooking. It was a way of saying, you are a servant. You belong in a subservient role. It was a racist and sexist attack.
So you have this brand that is commercially dominant, legally powerful, but culturally radioactive. It's a slur, it's a racist caricature, but it's also on everyone's breakfast table. Something had to give.
And 2020 was the breaking point.
June 17th, 2020. This is right in the middle of the George Floyd protests. The country is having a massive, painful reckoning with racial justice.
The context is everything. Quaker Oats, which is owned by PepsiCo, makes the announcement. They said the brand would be discontinued to make progress toward racial equality. They admitted, for the first time really, that the brand's origins were based on a racial stereotype.
And it was a domino effect.
Immediate. Within 24 hours, the owners of Uncle Ben's, Mrs. Butterworth's, and Cream of Wheat all announced they were reviewing their branding. It was like a dam broke. These brands had survived the civil rights movement of the 60s, but they couldn't survive 2020.
So they scrubbed the image, but then came the question of the name. What do you call it?
And this is where history comes full circle. In February 2021, they announced the new name, Pearl Milling Company.
Which, as we learned at the start, was the name of the original company Rutt and Underwood started in 1888.
It's a deep cut. It returns the brand to the inventors of the technology, rather than the caricature used to sell it. It's bland, sure, but it's historically accurate to the product's origin.
But there's a legal twist here too, right? I noticed that for a while, the boxes still said Aunt Jemima in small print, formerly known as...
That is the trademark law biting them again. PepsiCo explained that if they completely abandoned the name immediately, just stopped using it entirely, a third party could essentially claim trademark abandonment, snap up the rights, and start selling a real Aunt Jemima syrup.
That is wild. They have to keep using it to kill it.
They have to transition it carefully to keep control of the intellectual property so someone else doesn't launch a zombie brand, using the racist imagery. It's a legal minefield.
Now, here is where it gets really interesting, and maybe a little unexpected. You would think the descendants of the women who played Aunt Jemima, Nancy Green, Lillian Richard, Anna Short Harrington, you'd think they would be thrilled to see the caricature go.
You would think. It seems logical. But it wasn't that simple. Not at all.
Tell us about the reaction from the families.
Well, let's look at Lillian Richard's family. Remember, she's the one from the pancake capital of Texas. Vera Harris, her family historian, was quoted saying, "I wish we would take a breath and not just get rid of everything. It is our history."
It is our history. That's powerful.
And Larnell Evans, who is the great-grandson of another one of the models, Anna Short Harrington, he was even more direct. He sued Quaker Oats, though the lawsuit was dismissed. He said, "This is an injustice. This is part of my history."
Explain that tension. Why would they want to keep a brand rooted in a happy slave narrative?
Because for these families, the women weren't caricatures. They were their grandmothers, their great aunts. They were pioneers.
Right.
You have to imagine the context of the early 20th century. For a black woman to be nationally famous, to travel, to be the face of a major corporation, that was virtually impossible.
It's an achievement, a real one.
It was a massive achievement. They took a role that was designed to mock them, and they infused it with dignity and professionalism. They used the money to support their families. They became local heroes.
So by erasing the brand, the families feel like the company is erasing their ancestors' success.
Exactly. It feels like erasing the evidence that they were there. It's a double-edged sword. The image is painful for society, but the erasure is painful for the descendants. It's a really complex emotional position for them to be in.
It's the nuance that gets lost in a press release. You're removing a racist symbol, but you're also removing the only monument these women had.
Which is why the work of people like those fighting for Nancy Green's headstone is so important. If the brand goes away, we have to find other ways to remember the women. We have to separate the actors from the role. We have to tell their stories.
It reminds me of Hattie McDaniel winning the Oscar for Gone with the Wind. She played a mammy, a stereotype, but she broke a barrier to do it. And she famously said, "I'd rather play a maid than be one."
It is the exact same tension. Do you celebrate the barrier breaking, or do you condemn the role that required it? The answer is usually, you have to do both. You have to hold both thoughts at the same time.
So we have gone from a surplus of flour in a Missouri mill to a minstrel show to a giant barrel in Chicago to a trademark revolution and finally to a bland box that says Pearl Milling Company.
It is a journey, and I think it shows that consumer goods are never just goods.
Yeah.
They are artifacts of the culture that made them. They're like little time capsules.
That bottle on the table wasn't just syrup, it was a story about how America wanted to see itself.
And how it hid the parts it didn't want to see. The happy slave propaganda was a way to consume the labor of black women without having to acknowledge their suffering or their citizenship.
But it also gave women like Nancy Green and Lillian Richard a stage.
A stage they shouldn't have needed, but a stage they used nonetheless. And they used it with grace and power in a world that gave them very few options.
So here is my question for you to chew on as you go about your day. We looked at the syrup bottle, but look around your kitchen. Look at your pantry. Look at the brands you trust.
How many other traditions or nostalgic items in your daily life are rooted in constructed histories? How many are selling you a story you've never really questioned?
We love heritage brands. We love things that feel old and authentic. But often, that authenticity is just a marketing campaign from 1890 designed to sell you a worldview along with your breakfast.
And when those brands disappear or change, do we lose the history, the good and the bad? Or does it finally free us to create something new?
Something to think about the next time you pour syrup on your pancakes. Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you next time.